Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we turn our attention from the cosy corners of history to a place where comfort was a foreign concept. Picture a small, flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows on damp stone walls. The air hangs thick with the smell of iron, sweat, and something far more unpleasant. A stench that clings to your clothes and the back of your throat. A solitary bell tolls in the distance, each chime a hammer blow against the silence. You're standing at the threshold of a new life, a life you probably won't survive, let alone enjoy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just arrived, a wide-eyed boy of maybe 12 or 13, your father's hand a firm, final weight on your shoulder. He doesn't say much, and you don't need him to. The walk to this place, the long silent trudge through the mud of the city's unpaved streets has said everything. Poverty, the relentless gnawing poverty that chews away at hope and dignity, has brought you here. This is your future, a grim and certain path away from the ever-present threat of starvation. A massive iron-bound door scarred with the marks of time and misuse creaks open, groaning like a dying animal. The sound sends a shiver straight down your spine. You step inside, and the world outside, the distant shouts of merchants, the clatter of a cart over cobblestones fades into a memory. A hulking man wrapped in a stained leather apron that seems to absorb all light stands waiting. His face is a roadmap of hard living, a landscape of scars and a perpetually weary scowl. This is the master, and you are now his apprentice. Your father nods to the master, a single decisive gesture, then turns and leaves without a backward glance. The door thuds shut behind him, sealing you in. This is it. The master, whose name you will soon learn is Klaus, doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He grunts, motions with a calloused hand, and you follow him deeper into the gloom. The light from a few scattered torches does little to push back the darkness. The air grows colder, thicker. The stones under your worn shoes are slick with a perpetual film of moisture and something else. A coppery metallic smell that you will soon learn to identify instantly. The place is a labyrinth of stone passages and heavy wooden doors, each one a promise of the unspeakable. You soon find yourself in what passes for an antechamber, a cluttered space filled with a bizarre collection of items. On one wall, a rack holds an assortment of oddly shaped metal instruments. They gleam faintly in the torchlight, their surfaces polished by years of grim use. There are hooks, tongs, pincers of various sizes, and an array of hammers and mallets. Some are simple, others look like monstrous mechanical spiders. You're a boy who has spent his life working with his hands, but these tools, these are not for carpentry or farming. A knot of cold dread tightens in your stomach. Klaus, your new master, watches you with a detached expression. He picks up a set of what looks like tongs with serrated edges and holds them up. This, he says, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, is for grip. And this, he picks up a heavy, blunt mallet, is for persuasion. You will learn the difference, boy. The words hang in the air, heavy and full of unspoken meaning. This is your first lesson, a lesson in the brutal pragmatism of this place. Your training begins with the most mundane of tasks. You are a cleaner, a scullery boy for the damned. You scrub the floors, wash the blood from the stone, and clean the instruments. The cold water, no matter how much soap you use, never seems to get the iron smell out of your hands. You learn to carry buckets of slop and waste, your nose eventually becoming numb to the overwhelming stench. This is the foundational layer of your apprenticeship, the normalization of horror. You're taught to see the gruesome as merely dirty, to view the aftermath of pain as just another chore. Historians still argue whether medieval torturers were seen as societal pariahs or simply cogs in the legal machine. For you, an apprentice, you are simply invisible. You are the shadow that cleans up after the performance, the nameless boy who carries the heavy buckets. The city folk, when they see you on the rare occasions you leave the dungeon, avert their eyes. There's a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the way people act around you. A quickening of pace, a tightening of lips. You are marked, even if you're not yet a torturer. It's a bit like being the kid who gets to clean the teacher's whiteboard. Everyone wants a clean board, but no one wants to admit they want your job. Your first exposure to the actual work is not as a participant, but as a silent observer. Klaus leads you down a winding stone staircase, the air growing colder with each step. The sounds of the world above are completely gone now, replaced by the faint rhythmic dripping of water and occasionally a muffled groan. He pushes open a heavy oak door and you freeze. Inside, a man is strapped to a device you don't recognise, his body contorted in an impossible shape. A low fire burns in a small hearth, and an iron rod glows a menacing orange in the flames. Klaus gestures to the corner of the room. "Watch," he says, his voice flat. You're a fly on the wall, a ghost in a chamber of horrors. Klaus's movements are precise and practiced. There is no wild fury or sadistic glee in his actions. It's a job. He is a craftsman, and his medium is human flesh and bone. He asks questions, his voice calm and steady, and each question is punctuated by the application of the glowing iron. The man on the rack screams, his pleas echoing off the stone walls. It's not the sound of a person anymore, but a series of raw, guttural noises. You want to look away, to cover your ears, but you can't. You're frozen, a terrified bird watching a snake. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen your mother tried to make you use once, and you realise that every single strange and awful thing you've ever encountered in your life pales in comparison to this. A quirky detail you learn quickly is the use of animal fats and special oils on the instruments. Not for sanitation, heavens no, but to make the instruments slide more easily, to reduce friction, and to prevent them from getting stuck in the gruesome parts of the work. It's a grim form of maintenance, a perverse kind of care for the tools that cause so much harm. Klaus teaches you to apply these oils, to keep the pincers and thumb screws in working order. It's a macabre housekeeping, a task that forces you to touch and feel the instruments of suffering. The first few weeks are a blur of cleaning, watching, and trying not to throw up. You learn the geography of the dungeon, the cells for common thieves, the deeper, more secure pits for heretics and traitors, and the various interrogation rooms, each one equipped with its own special devices. The sheer variety is astonishing. There's the rack, of course, the ever-present symbol of medieval torture. Then there's the strappado, a pulley system for hoisting people up by their wrists, and the boot, a device for crushing shins and feet. You begin to mentally catalogue them, a grim inventory of pain. It's a bit like learning the names of all the different vegetables in a market, only these vegetables bite back. The first time you're allowed to assist, it is a simple task. Klaus is working on a man accused of witchcraft, a small gaunt farmer with wild eyes. The farmer is strapped to a chair and Klaus needs you to hold a small metal funnel to the man's mouth. He then pours a steady stream of water into the funnel. It's a form of waterboarding, though the term doesn't exist yet. The man gags and chokes, his body convulsing as he fights for air. You hold the funnel steady, your hand trembling. Klaus's eye catches yours for a moment, and you see no judgment, no malice, just a cool professional assessment. Your hands are shaking, but you are not dropping the funnel. You're not running. You're doing the job. This is the turning point. This is the moment your innocence dies, not with a bang, but with a slow, choking gurgle of water. You're no longer just an observer. You are part of the process. You are an apprentice torturer, and the weight of that truth settles on you like a shroud. You've officially stepped from the outside world into the belly of the beast, and it's starting to digest you. The first night in the dungeon is a symphony of unfamiliar sounds. The low groan of the rack being reset echoes from a distant chamber, a mournful thrum that vibrates through the stone floor and into your very bones. The constant drip of water from the ceiling, a relentless, maddening rhythm, counts the seconds until dawn. You lie on a thin straw mat in a small damp cell, the air thick with the miasma of decay and something sharper, something you now recognise as fear. Your own fear, but also the residual terror that saturates the very walls. It's a collective dread, a palpable presence that never truly leaves this place. The first days blend into a grimy, exhausting blur. Your world shrinks to the confines of the dungeon. Your tasks are repetitive and grim. Cleaning the floors with sour-smelling lye and harsh brushes, sharpening the edges of various iron tools until they gleam with a wicked light, and hauling buckets of human waste to the outdoor pit. The smells are the worst. The overpowering stench of unwashed bodies, stale blood, and the sickly sweet odour of rotting flesh become your constant companions. You find yourself scrubbing your hands raw, trying to scour the memory of those smells from your skin, but it's a futile effort. The scent, like the dread, is a part of you now. Klaus, your master, is a man of few words and even fewer emotions. He moves through the dungeon with a quiet efficiency. His heavy footsteps a familiar, terrifying sound. He doesn't offer praise or comfort. He simply points, grunts, and you obey. You learn to read the subtle shifts in his expression, the slight tightening around his eyes that means you've done something wrong, the barely perceptible nod that signals a job well done. It's a brutal, silent education. He is less a teacher and more a force of nature, an unstoppable, grim river of duty. You're a shadow at his side now, learning to anticipate his needs. When he needs a fresh torch, you have it ready. When he finishes with a pair of pincers, you take them to be cleaned. You watch him work, a silent, unwilling audience to a performance of pain. He seems to have a deep, intuitive understanding of the human body, an unholy anatomy lesson learned not from books, but from years of practice. He knows exactly where to apply pressure to cause the most agony, where to twist a joint to inflict maximum pain without breaking a bone too soon. His movements are precise, almost graceful in their grim purpose. One of the first things you learn is the importance of psychology. Klaus isn't just about inflicting pain. That, you soon realise, is the easy part. The true artistry of his craft lies in breaking the will. He teaches you to observe the subtle tells, the way a person's eyes dart around, the involuntary clenching of a jaw, the faint trembling in a hand that tries to remain still. These are the cracks in the armour of their resolve, the entry points for the real work. He once said, with a rare flicker of something almost like pride in his voice, "The body screams, but it's the mind that confesses." A mainstream historical fact you absorb is that medieval justice was built on the principle of confession. Without a confession, a conviction was often impossible. Torture, therefore, wasn't seen as a punishment, but as necessary and, in many eyes, a legitimate legal tool to extract the truth. It was a formal process, often conducted under the watchful eye of a magistrate or an official notary, who would dutifully record every question and every response. The logic, as twisted as it sounds now, was that no one would endure such suffering for a lie. The pain was supposed to burn away the falsehoods and reveal the truth, like fire purifying metal. A quirky tidbit that you find both fascinating and horrifying is the way some torturers use distraction as a form of psychological manipulation. They would spend hours telling a prisoner a long, boring story or meticulously describing the mundane details of their own day, all while a slow-acting device like the thumbscrews or the boot was steadily tightening. The contrast between the mind-numbing banality of the conversation and the mounting physical agony was meant to disorient the prisoner, to break their focus and make their resolve crumble more quickly. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate widespread technique, or just the eccentric method of a few particularly creative torturers. The prisoners themselves are a kaleidoscope of humanity, all stripped of their dignity. There are common thieves caught stealing bread. Their hunger-thin bodies are testament to their desperation. There are suspected heretics, their faces pale and their eyes alight with a fanatical zeal that Klaus seems to find particularly annoying. There are noblemen and women, brought low by political intrigue, their fine clothes replaced with rags, their haughty expressions replaced with terror. To you, they are all the same, bodies to be prepared, minds to be broken. You have to shut down the part of you that sees them as people. It's a survival mechanism, a necessary emotional quarantine. One day, you are tasked with cleaning a device you haven't seen before. It's a large wooden chair covered in hundreds of sharp iron spikes. The spikes aren't long enough to pierce the flesh deeply, but they are sharp enough to cause excruciating pain with even the slightest movement. You're told it's called the iron chair or the chair of interrogation. As you scrub away the dried residue from the spikes, a cold wave of revulsion washes over you. This isn't about confession. It's about slow, sustained, and unrelenting torture. There's a joke you remember hearing in the market once, a grim little ditty about a man so stubborn he'd argue with a brick wall. Well, a brick wall never had to sit in this chair. You also learn about the subtle social hierarchies within the dungeon. The master, of course, is at the top. Below him are the assistants, the men who have graduated from your current role. They have the dubious privilege of handling the less intricate but no less brutal work. And at the bottom, there is you, the apprentice, the scullion, the boy who fetches and cleans, You're a ghost, a presence that is seen but not acknowledged. The assistants talk amongst themselves. Their conversation's a mix of gallows humour and professional shop talk. They discuss the temperament of a new prisoner, the proper seasoning for a certain device, and the artistry of a particularly well-executed session. You listen, silent and wide-eyed, absorbing their twisted vocabulary. This isn't just a job. It's a culture, a hidden society with its own language, customs, and grim traditions. You realise that you aren't just learning a profession. You're being initiated into a brotherhood of pain. There is a strange camaraderie among them, a shared understanding forged in the crucible of their work. They are the keepers of a dark secret, the men who do what others cannot and will not, the necessary evils in the machine of justice. You're reminded of how the town baker talks about the best way to proof bread, or how a blacksmith discusses the right temperature for forging iron. It's the same tone of professional detachment, just applied to a far more gruesome subject. The physical toll on you is also significant. Your hands are perpetually chapped and cracked from the lie and the scrubbing. Your back aches from hauling heavy buckets and scrubbing stone floors. Your lungs burn from the damp, foul air. But the psychological toll is far worse. The screams of the prisoners, once so shocking, begin to fade into the background, becoming a part of the dungeon's white noise. The sight of blood, once so horrifying, becomes just another mess to clean up. You're becoming desensitized, and you hate yourself for it. But what choice do you have? This is your life now. The door to the outside world is closed, and you are trapped in a slow-motion descent into darkness. You remember that time your younger sister had a bad fever and you sat by her bed, your heart a small, frantic bird in your chest. The helplessness you felt then, the desperate wish for her pain to end, is a distant, foreign memory. Now, you are on the other side of that equation. You are part of the system that inflicts the pain, a small but essential cog in the machine. You think of her sometimes, of her bright, innocent face, and you wonder what she would think of you now. And then you push the thought away, because thinking about it hurts more than any physical pain you've ever experienced. Your apprenticeship is not just about learning the mechanics of torture. It is about learning to turn off your empathy, to silence the part of you that screams in protest. It is a slow, agonizing process of becoming less human so that you can fulfill your new role. And in the grimy, fetid depths of the dungeon, you feel that transformation happening, piece by painful piece. You're a boy no longer. You're a fledgling monster, a shadow in the darkness, and you are just getting started. Your apprenticeship deepens, and you find yourself no longer just a cleaner, but a permanent fixture in the interrogation room. The transition is subtle. Klaus, with a grunt and a nod, moves you from fetching water and cleaning up to holding instruments, tightening ropes, and performing the smaller, more mundane tasks of inflicting pain. It is an education in the art of the question. You're taught that the purpose of torture is not just pain, but the controlled application of it. It's a precise, delicate, and utterly terrifying dance between interrogator and prisoner, a perverse negotiation where the stakes are life, limb, and soul. You watch as Klaus carefully selects his tools for each session. It's never random. A common thief might warrant the strappado, a simple pulley system that dislocates shoulders with terrifying efficiency, because his crime is seen as a matter of simple greed. A suspected heretic, on the other hand, might face the iron chair or the thumbscrews, devices designed for slow, methodical pain that leaves little lasting physical mark but a lifetime of psychological scars. The goal, Klaus explains without ever saying a word, is to match the pain to the sin, or at least to the accusation. The first key lesson is the importance of a graduated escalation. You don't start with the rack. You start with psychological pressure, with cold, with hunger. You start with the threat of pain. A prisoner is brought in, sometimes already weak and disoriented from days in the cold, damp cells. Klaus will speak to them, his voice low and reasonable, asking them to confess. He'll show them the instruments, his hand lingering on a specific device, a silent promise of what's to come. This initial phase, you learn, is crucial. Some prisoners break before a single drop of blood is shed. They are the easiest, the ones who crumble under the weight of their own imagination. Next, if the prisoner remains defiant, comes the minor tortures. You learn to apply the thumbscrews, a deceptively simple device. It is a slow-turning vice that crushes the thumb joints. You are taught to turn the screw in small, precise increments, just enough to cause excruciating pain without causing the bone to shatter immediately. The goal is to keep the pain going, to make it a constant, throbbing presence that fills the prisoner's entire world. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is that the thumb and finger screws were so common and so widely used precisely because they could be used to inflict severe pain without drawing blood or leaving a visible, permanent mark that might be used to invalidate a confession. A confession obtained under duress was legally suspect, but if there were no obvious signs of torture on the body, it was more likely to be accepted by the court. It's a gruesome legal loophole, one you become very familiar with. A quirky detail you observe is how some torturers would talk to the prisoners during these sessions, not about their crimes, but about something completely mundane. One assistant, a man named Ulrich, with a surprisingly gentle face, would talk to his patients about his garden. He would describe in painstaking detail the care of his rose bushes, or the battle he was having with slugs. The contrast between his calm, almost soothing voice and the raw terror in the room was a chilling masterclass in psychological manipulation. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate strategy to disorient the prisoner or simply a coping mechanism for the torturer himself, a way to maintain his own fragile sanity in a world of sanctioned horror. The most difficult part of the job is not the physical act, but the constant battle with your own burgeoning empathy. You're a boy, remember? A kid who once cried when his dog got hit by a cart. Now you are a witness and a participant in the methodical dismantling of another human being. You force yourself to see the prisoners as objects, as problems to be solved, as puzzles to be broken. You focus on the task at hand, tightening the rope, turning the screw, fetching the hot poker. You become a collection of automated movements, a series of pre-programmed actions designed to keep your mind from seeing the suffering you are causing. It's a bit like learning to bake a loaf of bread, where you just focus on the kneading and the yeast, and not on the hunger of the people who will eventually eat it. You just do the job. You learn to read the room, the subtle signals from Klaus and the magistrate, the official who sits at a small table in the corner, scribbling notes with a quill pen. The magistrate might give a small nod, a barely perceptible gesture that means continue. Or he might clear his throat, a sign that the pain is sufficient and it is time to ask the question again. It's a grim, silent communication, a dance you learn to interpret with unnerving speed. The magistrate's presence is key. He is the one who gives the work its legal weight, its veneer of legitimacy. There is a moment, during a session with a woman accused of poisoning her husband, where the process falters. The woman is tied to a stool, and her fingers are in the thumb screws. She's not screaming, but she's crying silently, her face a mask of agony. Klaus asks her the same question for the 10th time. Did you mix the poison with his wine? She shakes her head, her whole body convulsing with the effort. Klaus, with a low growl, nods at you. You know what he wants. You're to turn the screw again. Your hand hovers over the wooden handle, and for a split second you hesitate. You look at her face, at the tear tracks glistening on her cheeks, and you see not a poisoner, but a human being in unimaginable pain. You see the shadow of your own sister's face, pale with fever. The connection is electric, a jolt of recognition that threatens to shatter your carefully constructed emotional walls. Klaus's voice, sharp as a whetted blade, cuts through your paralysis. Boy! Now! The command is laced with an undercurrent of impatience and veiled threat. You wrench your gaze away from the woman's face and back to the screw. You grab the handle and turn it, the wood rough against your palm. A low, keening sound escapes the woman's throat. You feel the crunch of cartilage and the give of bone through the vice, a sickening sensation that you will never forget. You have crossed a line, a point of no return. You have moved from observer to perpetrator, from a child to a torturer. There's no going back, the woman confesses. It is a garbled, broken stream of words, an admission of guilt that sounds more like a prayer for mercy than a statement of fact. The magistrate scribbles furiously, his quill scratching on the parchment like a frantic mouse. Klaus nods, satisfied, and the session is over. The woman is untied, her hands mangled and useless. She's led away to her cell to await a trial that is now a mere formality. You stand there, your hand still throbbing with the memory of the screw, a cold sweat on your brow. You feel a strange mix of relief and profound self-loathing. You did it. You helped break a human being. The aftermath is always the same. You clean the instruments, your movements now more confident, more practiced. You scrub the blood and sweat from the stone floor, your mind a blank slate. You try not to think about the faces, the cries, the terror. You focus on the grime, the physical reality of the mess you're cleaning. It's a form of penance, a gruesome ritual of purification that never quite cleanses you of the stain. You learn that there is a distinct difference between the screams of physical pain and the cries of a broken spirit. The former is a sharp, animal sound. The latter is a low, mournful wail, a sound of utter despair and defeat. It is this second sound that is the most unsettling, the sound that haunts your sleep and echoes in your waking hours. It's the sound of a person's soul leaving their body, a final and complete surrender. You realise that this is what Klaus meant by breaking the mind. It's the ultimate goal, the twisted culmination of the entire process. Your days are now a monotonous cycle of fear, pain, and cleaning. You eat your bland porridge, you listen to the rhythmic drip of the water, and you watch Klaus work, a master craftsman at his cruel art. You are his shadow, his second pair of hands, and his unwilling successor. You are learning to be a torturer, not because you want to, but because you have to. Because the alternative is a return to the poverty that gnaws at the soul, a return to the world that discarded you. So you stay, you watch, you learn, and you harden your heart, one turn of the screw at a time. The boy you were is a rapidly fading memory, replaced by the grim, silent, and efficient apprentice. The man's name is Anselm. You learned it from the magistrate's quill, a whisper on the parchment. He is a shoemaker, or was a shoemaker, before he was branded a heretic. His crime, as best you can gather from the hurried snippets of conversation between Klaus and the court official, was to question the authority of the local bishop, to suggest that salvation was a matter of a personal relationship with God, not an intricate series of rituals and payments to the church. He is a quiet man, his hands, the hands of a craftsman, now trembling, and his eyes hold a terrifying mix of defiance and absolute terror. This is your first time not just assisting, but performing a significant portion of the work yourself, under Klaus's watchful eye. He has decided you are ready. You're no longer merely the water boy for the damned. You are the one who turns the screw. The realization hits you like a physical blow, a cold punch to the gut. The night before, you had a strange fractured dream where you were back in your village, helping your father mend a fishing net. The threads were tangled, and no matter how hard you worked, they would not come apart. When you woke, you realized the tangled threads were not in the net, but in your own soul. Anselm is led into the small interrogation room, a space so familiar to you now that it feels like a second home. The air is still and heavy, and the torches flicker, casting long, menacing shadows. Anselm sees the devices on the wall, and his eyes, which had held such a brave fire just moments before, dim slightly. He is tied to a simple wooden chair, his hands strapped to the arms. Klaus speaks to him, his voice low and devoid of emotion, a monotone that makes his words even more chilling. Anselm, the charges are grave. The bishop is a man of God. You have slandered his good name and spoken against the Holy Church. Confess your sins, recant your foolish words, and you will find mercy. Anselm, his voice a low and trembling rasp, refuses. I have not slandered him. I have spoken the truth as God has revealed it to me. My words were not foolish, but righteous. Klaus says nothing. He simply turns and looks at you. The nod is barely perceptible, but you understand. You step forward, a heavy iron key in your hand. This is a simple, common tool, a device called the boot, or shin crusher. It is a two-piece iron clamp that fits around the leg just below the knee. You're to apply the clamp and with the key tighten it, steadily and slowly, putting pressure on the calf and shin bones. It's a task that requires strength, but more importantly, a sickening sense of deliberation. You feel a wave of nausea, but you push it down. You remember Klaus's words about focusing on the task, on the mechanics, not the man. You approach Anselm, your hands shaking slightly. You fit the iron clamp around his left leg. The metal is cold against his skin. His eyes, fixed on yours, are wide with a terrified question, an unspoken plea. You see his face, and you see not a heretic, but a man of simple faith, a shoemaker who probably whistled while he worked, a man with a family. You force yourself to look away, to focus on the key, the cold, unforgiving metal in your hand. You insert the key and turn. The mechanism grinds and squeals, a sound that seems to echo the protest of your own conscience. Anselm's leg is caught, and the pressure begins to build. A soft groan escapes his lips. You turn again, and the groan becomes a sharp gasp. You turn once more and he screams, a long piercing wail that tears through the silence of the room. You have done it. You have inflicted pain, not as an assistant but as a principal. The taste in your mouth is bitter, like bile. A mainstream historical fact that you realise in this moment is the profound, almost ritualistic nature of torture. It was not a chaotic act of violence. It was a formal, legal process with strict, albeit often ignored, rules. The court's presence, the note-taking, the careful progression of tools, it all lent a terrible legitimacy to the work. It was a dark mirror of a religious ceremony, a grim liturgy of pain and confession. You're expected to continue, to turn the key until Anselm breaks. But you hesitate, your hand frozen on the key. You remember the fear in his eyes, the simple humanity of the man. Klaus sees your hesitation. He steps forward, his face a mask of disappointment. He takes the key from your hand, his grip firm and unyielding. With a single, powerful motion he turns the key 2 full revolutions. The grinding sound is louder this time, a sickening final protest of bone and flesh. Anselm's scream is cut short, replaced by a choked rattling sound. His body convulses once, twice, and then he goes limp, a silent, sobbing ruin in the chair. Klaus looks at you, his eyes filled with a chilling mixture of instruction and contempt. Pity is a luxury we cannot afford, boy. Pity is a weakness that will get you killed. Or worse, get you praying. A quirky tidbit that you later hear from one of the other assistants, a grizzled old man named Thomas, is that some torturers, to maintain their sanity, would refuse to make eye contact with their patients. They would treat them as if they were objects, as if their eyes were simply blank pieces of metal, not windows to a suffering soul. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate professional practice or a subconscious coping mechanism for the men who did this work day in and day out. For you, the damage is already done. You have looked into Anselm's eyes, and you will never be able to forget what you saw there. The session ends. Anselm, a broken shell of a man, confesses to everything. He recants his statements, professes his devotion to the bishop, and begs for mercy. The magistrate, his face placid, makes a final note, signs the parchment, and leaves. Klaus unties Anselm, his movements brisk and impersonal. He is a finished product, a shoemaker who has been remade into a penitent heretic. Anselm is led away, his legs swollen and purpling, his spirit crushed. You are left alone with Klaus, the silence of the room now filled with a phantom echo of Anselm's scream. Klaus hands you a cloth and points to the boot. Clean it. It is your mess. The words are a slap, a brutal reminder of your failure. You're not yet a master. You're still an apprentice, a boy who let his emotions get the better of him. You scrub the blood and sweat from the iron, your head down, your face hot with shame. Your first true act of torture, your first time inflicting pain without a screen of assistance, is a complete and utter disaster. You failed to break the man, and Klaus had to step in. You learn in that moment that this profession demands a complete and total emotional disengagement. You cannot afford to see the humanity in the person on the rack. They are no longer a person. They are a case, a body, a problem. You are a mechanic, and your job is to fix the problem no matter the cost. You find yourself in the small cell you call home, trying to scrub the memory of Anselm's eyes from your mind. But it is impossible. His face, his plea, the sound of the bone crusher, it is all seared into your memory. You're not a boy anymore. You're a torturer. And the truth of that weighs on you more heavily than any instrument of iron or wood. You remember the smell of your father's workshop, the scent of leather and wood shavings. It is so different from the metallic, coppery smell that now clings to your clothes. The memory is a small, flickering light in the darkness of your new world, and you hold on to it, a desperate final link to the person you once were. This is your new normal. You will continue to assist Klaus, and you will be given more opportunities to practice. You will learn to silence your own empathy, to turn off the part of your mind that sees the suffering of others. It will be a slow, agonizing process, a psychological torture far worse than anything you will ever inflict on another person. But you will do it, because you have to, because the alternative is starvation, a swift but no less brutal end. You are a survivor, and this is what survival looks like in the dark, cold heart of the dungeon. The transition from apprentice to assistant is less a formal ceremony and more a gradual, chilling slide into the depths. There's no ribbon cutting, no pat on the back. One day, you are the boy who fetches and cleans, and the next you are the second pair of hands, the one Klaus relies on for the more sustained, demanding work. The first sign of this new, grim elevation is a change in your title, spoken with a wry, almost invisible twist of the lip by one of the other assistants. "Looks like we have a new assistant here, boys." The words are a mix of welcoming and gallows humour, a grim acceptance of your new status. You're no longer just the boy. You are a professional now. Your responsibilities shift. You are still a cleaner, a custodian of horror, but now you have your own tools to maintain, your own responsibilities to a particular set of devices. Klaus hands you a set of pincers, a couple of heavy mauls, and a gleaming, vicious-looking pair of thumb screws. "Keep them clean," he grunts, his eyes a cold, steady assessment. A dull blade is a dangerous blade. An unkept tool is a sloppy confession. The message is clear. Your craft, no matter how barbaric, must be a craft of precision and care. You learn to oil the joints of the Iron Maiden, to keep the ropes of the strappado supple, and to ensure the fire for the brand is always a consistent, malevolent orange. The biggest change is psychological. As a mere apprentice, you were a witness, a ghost in the room. As an assistant, you are now a participant. You're expected to not only execute the torture, but to understand the subtle psychology behind it. You learn the importance of timing. You learn when to turn the screw and when to stop, to let the pain fester, to let the silence become a torture in itself. You learn to read the fear in a prisoner's eyes, not with empathy, but with the cold, detached eye of a butcher looking at a cut of meat. You have to, or you'll be the next one to fail, to let pity get the better of you, and Klaus's contempt is a punishment all its own. A mainstream historical fact that you begin to internalise is that the job of a torturer was often hereditary. Sons followed fathers into the profession, creating small, closed guilds of torturers who passed down their grim knowledge from generation to generation. It was a family business, a trade like any other. This is why you are here. Your father, a poor labourer, saw this as the only path to a stable life, a steady meal and a roof over your head. He saw it as a promotion, a way to lift your family out of destitution. You're not a monster. You're a legacy. A particularly gruesome, blood-stained one, but a legacy nonetheless. One day, you're tasked with the water cure. The prisoner is a woman accused of petty theft. Her crime born of hunger, she is tied down and you are to hold her head, tilting it back so that her throat is exposed. The other assistants will hold a cloth over her mouth and nose. Klaus, using a long-necked pot, will slowly pour water onto the cloth. It's not about drowning, you learn. It's about the suffocating, gagging sensation, the terror of not being able to breathe, the water filling your lungs and the desperate, primal fight for air. Your job is to hold her steady, to keep her from thrashing too much, to ensure the water flows correctly. You feel her heart pounding against your hand, a frantic, frantic bird. You remember a similar rhythm from a memory long buried, the beat of your sister's heart as you held her hand, a feverish, scared little girl. You push the memory down, far, far away. You're no longer a brother, a son, you're an assistant. A quirky detail you observe is how Klaus, and many of the other torturers, have a strange, almost superstitious reverence for their tools. They believe the tools have a sort of life of their own, a memory of the pain they have inflicted. Klaus will sometimes polish a tool for hours, his hands moving with a meditative grace, as if he's not just cleaning iron but appeasing a dark god. He tells you once, in a rare moment of introspection, that each tool has its own voice, its own way of speaking to a prisoner's body. He's not talking about the creak of wood or the groan of metal. He's talking about the subtle, almost mystical relationship between the instrument and the suffering it causes. Historians still argue whether this was a shared belief among torturers or just a professional affectation meant to intimidate prisoners and apprentices alike. You find yourself building a strange camaraderie with the other assistants. These men are your new family. There's Ulrich, the man who talks about his garden, a surprisingly gentle soul with a face that seems to have a perpetually haunted expression. There's Thomas, the old-timer with a face like a roadmap of grim experiences, who tells you stories of his youth in the dungeons, his words a mix of dry humour and weary resignation. They talk to you not as a boy, but as an equal. You are one of them now, part of the Brotherhood. They share their dark jokes, their methods, their small mundane concerns. It's a strange, twisted version of a normal workplace, where the small talk revolves around the best way to clean a rack, or the most efficient way to get a confession from a particularly stubborn prisoner. You learn a new language, a vocabulary of pain and suffering. You hear the words strappado, rack, boot, and thumbscrew, not as objects of horror, but as tools of your trade. You can hear a description of a crime and, like a baker deciding what ingredients he needs for a cake, you can mentally assemble the tools you'll need. A heretic requires the spiritual tools, the slow, methodical pain that leaves the mind intact but broken. A traitor requires the fast, brutal methods, the kind that tear the body and break the will quickly. This is the new you. You are a specialist, an expert in the gruesome. One night, after a particularly long and brutal session, you and Ulrich sit in the small antechamber, the smell of burnt flesh still clinging to the air. He looks at you, his eyes a sad, knowing blue. "You did well today, boy," he says, his voice a low whisper. "You've learned to listen to the silence. The silence after a scream is where the work is done." He claps you on the shoulder, a heavy, reassuring weight. "You're an assistant now. It's a fine job, boy. You'll never go hungry." You nod, a lump in your throat. He says it with pride, a professional pride that you're now expected to share. You are an assistant, you'll never go hungry, and you will never, ever be truly clean again. The weight of your new title is heavy. You now have a reputation to uphold, a standard of cruelty to maintain. The prisoners, when they see you, no longer see a scared boy. They see a torturer, a cog in the machine of justice. You see it in their eyes, the shift from a pleading look to a cold, resigned stare. You're no longer an apprentice, a novice. You're a professional, and your grim work has just begun. You find yourself remembering the feel of your father's calloused hand on your shoulder, that firm, final weight, the last touch of the outside world. He wanted a better life for you, a life where you didn't have to worry about where your next meal would come from. He never told you what this new life would entail. He couldn't. How could he describe this place, this work? This place, this work is a part of you now, a dark stain on your soul that will never wash out. You are an assistant. It's a fine job. You're a professional. And every night, as you lie on your straw mat, you hear the echoes of the screams, and you wonder, with a cold certainty that is more terrifying than any demon, if you have made a terrible, irredeemable mistake. But there is no turning back. The door is closed, the key is lost, and you are in the belly of the beast. Your new life has begun, and it is drenched in blood and despair. With your new title of assistant, you begin to see the world of torture, not as a series of isolated horrors, but as a community, a grim and secretive society with its own unwritten rules and social hierarchy. It is a world you are now fully a part of, and the other torturers, once distant and imposing figures, now become your peers. You learn to recognize them not by their faces, but by their gait, their posture, the way they carry themselves. They walk with a certain heaviness, a kind of permanent slump in their shoulders, as if the weight of their work is a physical burden they can never put down. You meet the other assistants and torturers from the surrounding towns and cities. They gather at the local tavern on certain nights, not a public house, but a small, dingy establishment tucked away in a back alley, where the common folk dare not tread. The tavern is a sanctuary for them, a place where they can speak their own grim language without fear of judgment. You sit in a corner, listening, your new role granting you a seat at the table. Their conversations are a surreal mix of the mundane and the monstrous. They talk about the cost of beer, the quality of the new hangman's rope, the stubbornness of a prisoner, and the best way to get a confession out of a particularly pious nun. It's a grotesque kind of shop talk, and you find yourself slowly, inevitably becoming comfortable with it. A mainstream historical fact you learn is that the position of torturer was often seen as a necessary evil, a role that was crucial to the functioning of the legal system, but that also rendered the person who held it an outcast. They were often paid well for their work, but they were not allowed to join guilds, were forbidden from living within the city walls in many places, and were often buried in separate, unconsecrated ground. They were society's enforcers, but they were also its lepers. This dual nature of your profession, the necessity and the ostracism, is a constant heavy presence in your life. You're a part of a community, but it is a community of outcasts, a brotherhood of the damned. You become familiar with the others. There's Ulrich with his soft face and love of gardening, a man who seems perpetually on the verge of tears, but who can apply the thumbscrews with a chilling mechanical precision. There's Thomas, the old man who talks of his youth, his body riddled with aches and pains from a lifetime of brutal work. He tells you a story of a particularly stubborn prisoner who, after weeks of torture, finally broke down and confessed, only to be found innocent a week later. The story is not told with regret, but with a kind of grim, professional detachment, as if it were simply a cost of doing business. You're reminded of a quirky detail you once heard from a travelling merchant about how some of the more fastidious torturers would clean their tools with a special mixture of vinegar and herbs, not for sanitation, but because they believed it would cleanse the memory of the previous prisoner's pain. Historians still argue whether this was a real belief or just a form of professional ritual. You also learn about the rivalries and collaborations between torturers. A new particularly gruesome device invented by a torturer in a neighbouring city becomes a topic of excited if macabre conversation. There is a sense of professional pride, a competitive spirit in their grim craft. They compare notes, exchange ideas, and share stories of their most successful sessions. A successful session, you learn, is not one where the prisoner is broken, but one where the confession is obtained with minimal physical damage and in the shortest amount of time. Efficiency is the ultimate measure of their skill. The drinking is a ritual, a way to numb the memories of the day's work. The assistants drink heavily, their conversations getting louder and more vulgar as the night wears on. You, being new and still a boy, drink little, preferring to listen and observe. You watch as they try to forget, to laugh, to pretend they are not the men who break bones and tear flesh for a living. But the pretense is thin. The laughter is strained, the jokes are tinged with a dark, bitter humour, and their eyes, when they are not laughing, are filled with a profound and bone-deep sadness. They are all, in their own way, prisoners of their profession. You remember your own father, a hard man who worked with his hands, and the simple joy he took in a good day's work. The men here find no joy, only a kind of grim satisfaction in a job well done. This new social life is a paradox. You are a part of a community, a brotherhood, but you are also more isolated than you have ever been. The camaraderie is a shield, a way to protect each other from the world that despises them, but it also reinforces the walls that separate you from everyone else. You're no longer just a boy who lives in the city. You're a torturer who lives on the fringes, in the shadows, a necessary evil in a world that would rather pretend you don't exist. You find yourself wondering about the lives of these men outside of their work. Do they have wives, children? Do they have a dog, a garden, like Ulrich? The thought is a jarring, disorienting one. How can a man who spends his days breaking people apart go home and hold his children? You realise that this is the central unanswerable question of your new life, the separation of the man from the monster, the private life from the public one. A lot like the baker who sells you bread and smiles, and you never think about the time he accidentally burned his hand on the oven, or the exhaustion that fills him at the end of the day. Only your work leaves much more than a burn. One night Thomas, his words slurred from drink, leans over to you and whispers, his breath smelling of ale and decay. They hate us, boy. They pretend we don't exist. But when they need the truth, when they need a confession, they come to us, don't they? We are the honest ones. We get the truth, one way or another. The words are a mix of bitter truth and self-justification, a desperate attempt to find meaning and nobility in a profession that has none. You don't know whether to believe him or not, but you listen, because his words are the only glimpse you have into the heart of this grim community. You are a part of this now. The smell of the tavern, the dark jokes, the weary resignation of the men around you. It is all a part of your new life, a life you didn't choose but that chose you. You're a torturer, and the world has already judged you. The only community you have is this one, this brotherhood of the damned, and you cling to it. A desperate final link to a world of shared humanity, no matter how twisted that humanity may be. You feel yourself changing, the sharp edges of your guilt and revulsion slowly being worn down by the constant grind of the work and the grim camaraderie of the men around you. You are becoming one of them. You think back to that moment with the shoemaker, Anselm, when you saw the terror in his eyes and felt the hesitation. That moment, you now realise, was a farewell to your old self. The person who hesitated is gone, replaced by the assistant who now sits in this tavern, listening to men talk about their work, their faces etched with a profound and terrible weariness. You are a professional, a part of a community, and you are starting to believe, just a little, that this is simply the way the world works, that some people are meant to suffer so that others can live in peace. It's a lie, a comfortable lie, but one you are starting to tell yourself with more and more conviction. With your new status as an assistant, your education takes a more technical turn. You move beyond the simple mechanics of a job and begin to learn the full, horrifying breadth of your trade's tools. Klaus, with a rare, almost teacherly air, leads you on a tour of the dungeon's arsenal. It's a museum of human cruelty, a grim showcase of what the mind can conceive in the name of justice. You've seen some of these devices, of course, but now you are taught their names, their histories, and the proper way to operate them. First, there is the rack. This is the quintessential tool of your profession, the one all others are compared to. It's a simple, but brutally effective wooden frame with rollers at each end. The prisoner is tied to it by the wrists and ankles. You're taught how to operate the crank, a heavy iron handle that turns the rollers, slowly pulling the victim's body in 2 different directions. You learn to listen for the sickening, tearing sound of ligaments snapping and the faint pop of joints dislocating. Klaus explains that the key is not to tear the person apart immediately, but to stretch them, to keep the pain constant and increasing. It's a tool for breaking the body, but its true purpose is to break the mind, to make the prisoner wish for death. Next, he shows you the strappado, a device you've seen but not yet used extensively. It's a simple rope and pulley system. The prisoner's hands are tied behind their back, and they are hoisted into the air. The weight of their own body is what causes the pain, as the shoulder joints are pulled from their sockets. You learn the importance of the correct knots that won't slip, and will hold fast under the strain of a struggling body. He tells you that this is a great tool for a quick confession, a gentle persuasion he calls it, with a wry, unsettling humour. It leaves a lasting pain, but is not as permanent a destruction as the rack. A mainstream historical fact you learn is that the strappado was also sometimes used as a form of public punishment, not just as a tool of torture. People would be hoisted up and dropped a certain number of times, their fall broken by the rope, but the impact and the dislocated joints serving as a public spectacle of justice. Then there is the Iron Maiden. This one is more of a curiosity than a practical tool, at least in your dungeon. It's a large iron cabinet shaped like a human body, lined with dozens of long, sharp spikes. You're told that the prisoner is placed inside and the door is slowly closed. The spikes are positioned so that they will pierce the body in multiple places, but not vital organs, causing a slow, agonizing death. You're told that this device is mostly a psychological tool, a grim threat to persuade a prisoner to talk. Klaus points out that it's impractical, too heavy, too slow, and too difficult to clean. But the sheer terror it inspires is a tool in itself, a silent promise of what could be. You remember a quirky tidbit you once overheard from an old-timer, that some torturers would secretly put a small amount of honey on the spikes inside the maiden to attract ants. It's a detail so vile, so unnecessary it makes your stomach turn. Historians still argue whether the Iron Maiden was a common tool of medieval justice, or largely a product of later sensationalized folklore. Klaus also introduces you to a variety of smaller, more focused tools. There are the thumbscrews, of course, a device you're now intimately familiar with. You learn that different sizes of screws are used for different fingers and toes, and that they can be used to cause pain without leaving permanent marks. He shows you the pear of anguish, a small pear-shaped device that is inserted into a prisoner's mouth and then expanded by a screw, causing the jaw to dislocate. It's a tool used for a particular kind of stubbornness, for the prisoner who refuses to speak. There are the various branding irons, each one a different shape or symbol, a mark of the prisoner's crime, a permanent searing reminder of their sin. You learn to heat them in the fire to the perfect temperature, not too hot to burn too quickly, not too cold to fail to leave a mark. It's a grim form of artistry. The sheer volume and variety of the tools is staggering. It's a testament to the human imagination, a grim library of inventions dedicated to a single purpose, the infliction of pain. You feel a strange mixture of fascination and revulsion. You are learning a craft, a trade, but it is a craft that is built on the destruction of others. It's like a baker learning all the different kinds of flour, yeast, and ovens, only this baker's goal is to bake the life out of a person. There's a joke you remember hearing from a travelling jester. Why did the torturer get a promotion? Because he was good at making people crack. It's a grim little quip, and you find yourself, to your horror, almost smiling at the dark irony. You're also taught the importance of cleanliness and maintenance. Klaus is meticulous about his tools. They must be cleaned after every session, no matter how tired you are. The blood, the sweat, the bits of flesh, all of it must be scrubbed away. The joints must be oiled, the ropes checked for fraying, the fires banked and kept low. A tool in disrepair is a mark of a sloppy torturer, and a sloppy torturer is a professional failure. He tells you that the tools are a reflection of the man who uses them, and a professional, he says, is always in control, even of his tools. It's a chilling lesson in professional pride. One night, as you're cleaning the rack, the old man, Thomas, comes and stands beside you. He points to a faint stain on the wood, a dark, almost imperceptible discoloration. That, he says, his voice a low rasp, is a confession. Not a person's words, but their mark on the wood. We don't just get confessions with our tools, boy. We get them in the stains on the floor, in the marks on the wall. The dungeon remembers. The words are a chilling reminder that this place is not just a collection of tools and rooms, but a living, breathing entity, a repository of suffering and pain. The walls, the floors, the tools, they all hold the memories of those who have passed through this grim place. You are a keeper of these memories now, a custodian of this dark museum. You know the history of each tool, the kind of confession it is most likely to produce, the kind of pain it will inflict. You are becoming a connoisseur of cruelty, a master of a terrible craft. You remember a time when you saw a travelling magician, a man who could make coins disappear and pull doves out of thin air. You were fascinated by his skill, his ability to manipulate reality. Now, you are a magician of a different kind, one who can manipulate reality not with sleight of hand, but with pain, fear, and a well-placed thumbscrew. It is a terrifying realization, this understanding that you have traded one kind of fascination for another. You have traded wonder for horror, and there is no going back. You are a part of the dungeon now, as much as the cold stone walls and the iron tools. As you settle into your role as an assistant, a new, unsettling truth begins to emerge. The lives of torturers aren't spent entirely in the dank, shadowed depths of the dungeon. Many of these men, you realise with a jolt of cognitive dissonance, have families. They have wives who cook them dinner, children who run to greet them at the door, and lives outside of the screams and the iron. This dual existence, the jarring separation of the man from the monster, is a new and deeply disturbing part of your education. You first learn this from Ulrich, your colleague with the soft face and the green thumb. One day, as you are meticulously oiling a pair of thumbscrews, he looks at a faint spot of blood on the iron and sighs. "My wife is having the children over for a feast tonight," he says, his voice a low, mournful sound. "She's worried about the smell." He doesn't mean the food. He means the lingering scent of the dungeon that clings to his clothes, no matter how much he washes them. He talks about his children, a boy and a girl, with a gentle pride that feels completely out of place in this room. He talks about his son's love for whittling, his daughter's beautiful singing voice. He talks about them not with the grim detachment he uses for the prisoners, but with a palpable, heartbreaking affection. This is a mainstream historical fact you are now living. The torturer or interrogator was a professional, a member of the social fabric, albeit one on the fringes. He was paid for his services, often by the town or a local lord, and this payment supported his family. His work was seen as a necessary evil, a crucial component of a system of justice that believed in the cleansing power of confession. He was a man with a job, and that job, like any other, was a means to an end, to feed his family and keep a roof over their heads. You think of your own father, of his final, decisive hand on your shoulder, and you realise he was not just abandoning you to a grim fate, but giving you a path to survival, a way to lift your family out of the mud and the hunger. The mental gymnastics required to reconcile this double life are staggering. How does a man who spends his days dislocating joints and breaking spirits go home and play with his children? What stories does he tell his wife when she asks about his day? Does he say, "I got a difficult confession out of a heretic today"? Or does he simply say, "It was a long day, my dear." You find yourself imagining Ulrich's wife, a kind-faced woman with flour on her hands, and his children, their innocent eyes looking up at their father, the man who brings them their bread, their safety, their life. It's a grotesque puzzle, a paradox that defies comprehension. A quirky detail that Ulrich shares with you is the ritual he performs before he goes home. He has a small hidden chest in a corner of the dungeon, filled with clean clothes, a special brush for scrubbing his skin, and a handful of dried lavender. He changes his clothes, scrubs himself raw with a lye-based soap, and then rubs the lavender over his hands and face, trying to mask the scent of the dungeon. It is a ritual of purification, a desperate attempt to wash away the evidence of his work, both for his family and for his own sanity. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice among torturers, a kind of psychological armour they wore to separate their two lives, or if it was a solitary private ritual of a man desperate to hold on to his humanity. You also learn from Thomas, the old-timer with the grim face, about the financial side of your profession. The pay is good, he tells you, but irregular. There are fees for each session, for each confession, for each execution. There are also bribes for those who wish for a gentler session, or for a confession to be rushed. The economics of pain are a strange and intricate web. He talks about saving his money, buying a small plot of land outside the city walls where he plans to retire. He talks about it with a wistful, almost dreamy look in his eyes, as if the land is a promise of a future where he will finally be free of the screams and the blood. It's a very different version of a bedtime story, full of iron, gold, and death. You remember the way your father, a simple labourer, would speak of money. He spoke of it with a mix of fear and reverence, as a thing that could save you or destroy you. The money you earn here, you realise, is different. It is tainted. It is paid for in suffering, in broken bodies and shattered minds. You think about how you will spend your own earnings. Will you buy a new pair of shoes? A piece of bread? Or will the money feel like a heavy, blood-stained weight in your pocket? The double life of a torturer is a constant, terrifying performance. The man who smiles at his children is the same man who turned the thumbscrews. The husband who shares a bed with his wife is the same man who stretched a prisoner on the rack. The two worlds, the world of light and the world of shadow, exist in a fragile, horrifying balance. You watch as Klaus leaves for the day, his heavy footsteps fading into the distance, and you wonder what his home life is like. Does he have a wife? A child? A dog that wags its tail when he comes home? The thought is almost unbearable. It's a bit like imagining the big, scary beast from your childhood nightmares sitting down to eat dinner with his own family. The very idea is a violation of the natural order of things. You, being an orphan of sorts now, don't have this particular burden. You have no one to go home to, no one to hide your work from. Your home is the dungeon, and your family is the grim, silent men who work here. In a way, you are lucky. You're spared the hypocrisy, the constant draining performance of being two different people. But you're also utterly alone. Your life is singular, a long, dark path that leads to one place, a future as a full-fledged torturer. As the sun sets and the dungeon grows colder and darker, you find yourself thinking about Ulrich's wife. She worries about the smell. You understand that worry now. The smell isn't just a physical odour, it's a moral one, a scent of corruption that can never be fully washed away. It clings to you, to your clothes, to your hands, to your very soul. You know that no amount of lye soap or dried lavender can ever truly cleanse you of the blood on your hands. This is the life you have chosen, or rather, the life that has chosen you. It is a life of paradox and contradiction. You are a professional, a provider, and a vital part of the city's legal system. But you are also an outcast, a pariah, a man who lives in the shadows, and your community is a grim brotherhood of the damned. You are a family man, or you will be, and you will have to find a way to reconcile the two halves of your existence, to live a life that is both a blessing and a curse. You will have to learn how to love and how to break, how to build and how to destroy, and how to keep those two worlds from colliding. It's a terrifying prospect, a new kind of torture all its own, a slow, sustained breaking of your own spirit. As your apprenticeship gives way to full-fledged assistantship, you begin to grasp the legal and philosophical framework that justifies your grim work. It's not a chaotic free-for-all, but a highly regulated, though often brutal system. The law, you learn, is not an abstract concept. It is the very breath that animates the dungeon, the cold, hard logic that makes your profession possible. Without the law, you're just a brute, a sadist. With it, you are a crucial part of the machinery of justice. The most important figure in this legal dance is the magistrate, the official who presides over your sessions. He is a small, perpetually frowning man who sits at a small table in the corner of the interrogation room, his quill scratching on parchment, a silent but ever-present witness. He is not there to judge the guilt or innocence of the prisoner. That is for the court to decide. He is there to ensure that the proper legal procedures are followed, that the right questions are asked, and that the confession, when it comes, is properly documented. He is the official seal of approval, the man who turns your acts of brutality into legal fact. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is that torture was a formal part of the legal process in many parts of medieval Europe. It was seen as a way to extract the truth, especially in cases where there was strong evidence of guilt but no confession. The law dictated what tools could be used for how long and under what circumstances. It was not a tool of punishment, but a tool of investigation. The thinking was that a confession, even one obtained under duress, was the most solid form of evidence, a gold standard of truth that trumped all other testimony. It's a bit like a modern-day judge ordering a DNA test, only your method of testing involves a thumbscrew. You learn to read the magistrate's subtle cues. A clearing of the throat means it's time to stop and ask the question again. A sharp intake of breath means you've gone too far. A nod means to continue. It's a grim, silent collaboration, a partnership forged in the crucible of pain. You are the instrument of the law, and the magistrate is the hand that guides you. He is the one who gives you your moral shield, the one who allows you to believe that what you're doing is not just acceptable, but necessary. A quirky tidbit you learn from Thomas, the old-timer, is that some magistrates would refuse to look at the prisoner during the sessions, their eyes fixed on the parchment, as if the reality of the torture was too much for them to bear. Others, he tells you, would lean forward, their faces alight with a strange, almost prurient fascination, their own personal demons finding a dark mirror in the suffering before them. Historians still argue whether these magistrates were true believers in the legal necessity of torture, or simply men corrupted by their own power and the grim spectacle they were forced to witness. The law also dictates that a confession obtained through torture must be freely and voluntarily repeated outside of the torture chamber, in front of witnesses, and without any further threat of pain. This is a bit of legal theatre that you come to know well. The prisoner, their body broken and their will shattered, is brought before the court. The magistrate reads their confession, and they are asked to confirm it. And they always do. They always confirm. Because the memory of the dungeon, the threat of your hands, the silent promise of a return to the rack, that is a more powerful motivator than any truth. It's the final and most cynical act of the play. You begin to understand that the law is not just a set of rules, but a narrative, a story that the court tells itself about justice and truth. And you, the torturer, are a key character in that story. You are the one who forces the hidden truth to come to light, the one who cuts through the lies and the deception. You are the one who makes the story possible. It's a powerful and deeply corrupting realization. You're not a monster. You're a truth seeker, a man who, in the twisted logic of this world, serves a higher purpose. You remember the time a young, well-born merchant was brought in, accused of smuggling. He had connections, powerful friends who were whispering in the ears of the town council. The magistrate, in this case a man with a perpetually nervous tic, was clearly uncomfortable. He kept his eyes on the parchment, his quill shaking in his hand. He was a man of books and laws, not of iron and blood. He gave you the smallest of nods, a barely perceptible gesture, and you knew what he wanted. He wanted a quick confession, a swift end to this messy business. You used the thumbscrews, a device that leaves little permanent mark but causes excruciating pain. The merchant, not used to physical hardship, broke quickly. The magistrate, with a sigh of relief, scribbled down the confession, and the merchant was led away, his hands bruised and swollen, his reputation in tatters, but his life and limb intact. The law had been served. Or so they said. This is the hypocrisy that underpins your profession, a hypocrisy that is so deeply ingrained that it becomes a kind of truth. The law says torture is for truth, but it's really for confession. The law says the confession must be voluntary, but it's really the result of the most profound kind of coercion. The law says you are a tool of justice, but you are really a tool of power, and you, the man with the pliers and the brand, are the one who makes it all possible. There is a grim joke you hear from a fellow assistant. What's the difference between a torturer and a baker? The baker needs his dough, and the torturer needs his confessions. It's a dark, bitter humour that you are now a part of. The jokes, the rituals, the quiet conversations with the magistrate, it is all part of the grim tapestry of your new life. You are no longer just a man with a trade. You're a man with a purpose, a professional who serves a higher power, the law. You're a part of a system that is both brutal and self-justifying. You're a cog in a machine that runs on pain and fear. And the more you learn, the deeper you sink into this world, the more you realise that there is no escape. The law, that great all-encompassing narrative of justice, has you in its grip, and it will never let you go. Your role is not to question the law, but to enforce it, one turn of the screw, one scream at a time. The line between right and wrong has blurred, and in its place is a cold, hard logic. The law demands a confession, and you are the one who provides it. The most unsettling transition in your life is not a change in job description, but a change in venue. One morning, Klaus announces that your services are required outside of the dungeon's grim walls. A public execution. The city, which has been a distant muted sound for so long, suddenly becomes an immediate, overwhelming reality. You're to assist in the public branding of a condemned man, and then the public breaking on the wheel of a woman. It is a spectacle, a theatrical display of state power, and you are a part of the cast. The walk from the dungeon to the public square is a jarring assault on your senses. The air, once so thick with the miasma of decay, is now filled with the shouts of hawkers, the laughter of children, and the smells of baking bread and brewing ale. The sun, a rare visitor in your world, is a blinding, brilliant thing in the sky. The people of the city, once a faceless, indifferent mass, now stare at you with a mixture of fear and revulsion. They see the stains on your leather apron, the grime under your fingernails, the grim, silent expression on your face. They know who you are, and you are an outcast, a pariah. The public square is a sea of humanity, a churning, expectant crowd packed around the scaffold. The scaffold itself is a high wooden platform, a stage for the final act of a human life. The gallows stand tall and dark against the sky, a grim monument to justice. There is an almost festive atmosphere, a macabre carnival where the main event is the death of another human being. You're reminded of a fair you once attended as a boy, with jugglers and acrobats. Only here, the spectacle is real, and the stakes are life and death. Your first task is the branding. A man, accused of sedition, of speaking out against the local lord, is brought to the scaffold. He's bound to a post, his back bared. Klaus, with a grim efficiency, heats a brand in a small portable fire. The brand is in the shape of a symbol for traitor. The man is silent, his eyes fixed on the sky, a final defiant act. Klaus presses the glowing hot iron to the man's flesh. The sound is a sickening hiss, the smell a thick coppery stench of burning hair and skin that hangs in the air. The crowd, which had been buzzing with anticipation, falls silent for a moment, and then a low murmur, a sound of grim satisfaction, ripples through the mass of people. It's a shocking moment of shared experience, a collective witness to a brutal act. A mainstream historical fact you are now a part of is the use of public punishment as a form of social control. These spectacles were meant to be a warning, a chilling reminder of the consequences of breaking the law. The punishment was not just for the condemned, but for the entire city, a lesson in fear and obedience. The public executioner, a position often held by the torturer, was a central figure in this theatrical display, a visible symbol of the state's power to inflict pain and death. You, as an assistant, are a part of this symbolism now, a small but essential actor in a very large, very public drama. Next is the breaking on the wheel. The condemned is a woman, a young girl, really, accused of murdering her husband. She is tied to a large wooden wheel, her body spread-eagled, her limbs stretched and bound. Klaus approaches her with a heavy iron cudgel. The crowd is silent now, a collective, held breath. He speaks to her, his voice low, almost inaudible. She is crying, her body shaking, her pleas a broken stream of sobs. He raises the cudgel and with a series of brutal rhythmic blows begins to break her bones. The sound of the cudgel hitting her body is a horrible wet sound that you will never forget. Each blow is punctuated by a gasp from the crowd, a collective visceral response to the violence. It's a gruesome choreographed dance, a theatre of pain. A quirky tidbit you notice is that many people in the crowd have brought their children. The children, their faces a mix of morbid curiosity and wide-eyed terror, are held up on their father's shoulders so they can get a better view. The parents are using the spectacle as a lesson in morality, a grim living textbook on the consequences of sin. You remember your own childhood and the stories you were told about demons and monsters. You realise with a cold certainty that the real monsters are not in the stories, but on the scaffold and in the crowd. Historians still argue whether these public spectacles served their purpose as a deterrent or simply normalised violence and cruelty, making the populace more callous and less empathetic. You and Klaus stand on the scaffold, a silent, grim presence. The crowd, once so full of life and sound, is now quiet, a sea of white faces and wide eyes. You look out at them, and you see not just a crowd, but a mirror. They are here for the same reason you are, for the same dark fascination with suffering and death. You are not so different from them, you realise. Only you are the one who does the work. You are the one who gets his hands dirty. The wind down after the execution is as ritualistic as the execution itself. The bodies are taken down, the scaffold is cleaned, and the instruments are wiped down and put away. The crowd disperses, their grim appetites sated. The sun, which had been so bright, now feels cold and judgmental. The city, which had been so alive, now feels empty and hollow. You and Klaus walk back to the dungeon in silence, the weight of the day's work heavy on your shoulders. You are a part of a grotesque public ritual, a necessary actor in a play you never wanted to be in. You think about the woman on the wheel, her broken body, her cries. You think about her husband, the man she supposedly murdered. You wonder about the truth, the real truth of their lives, the messy, complicated reality that the law, in its brutal simplicity, has reduced to a single, final act of violence. You realise that your profession is not about truth at all. It's about stories, about narratives that are convenient for the powerful. And you, the assistant, the torturer, are the one who writes the final brutal chapter of that story. You remember the feeling of the crowd's eyes on you, their mixture of fear and disgust. You realise that you're not just an outcast, but a symbol. You are the embodiment of their own dark fears, their own capacity for cruelty. They hate you, but they need you. They despise what you do, but they need you to do it. You are the man in the shadows, and you are the one who makes their world of light possible. It's a grim, sobering thought, a heavy burden to bear. You are the cost of their justice, the price of their peace, and you, the boy who once dreamt of a different life, are now paying that price. One brand, one blow, one broken body at a time. The fervour of the witch hunt sweeps through the land like a fever, and your world, once so defined by legal procedure and measured cruelty, is suddenly plunged into a new kind of madness. The accusations come fast and furious, a sickness spreading through the populace. A woman's crops fail, and she is a witch. A child falls ill, and a neighbour is a witch. A man's luck runs sour, and he points a trembling finger at the local healer. This is a new breed of prisoner, and their arrival changes the grim calculus of your work. They are not accused of treason or theft. They are accused of consorting with the devil himself. The tool of this new trade is not a thumbscrew or a rack, but a book, the Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of Witches. The magistrate, once a man of nervous tics and legalistic scribbling, is now replaced by an inquisitor, a man whose zeal burns with a cold, righteous fire. He carries this book everywhere, a small leather-bound volume that is a New Testament of torment. He quotes from it often, his voice a low, chilling monotone. This is not just a legal text. It is a theological one, a guide to identifying, interrogating, and ultimately destroying witches. You learn from the Inquisitor's relentless lectures that witches, according to the Malleus, are a new breed of criminal. They are not merely mortals who have broken the law, but agents of Satan, their bodies mere vessels for demonic possession. This belief changes everything. The purpose of the torture is no longer to get a confession of a crime, but to break the will of the devil, to force the demon to speak through the possessed host. It's a grotesque kind of exorcism, a theological drama played out in the cold, damp confines of the dungeon. A mainstream historical fact you are now a part of is the chilling power of this book. Published in the late 15th century, the Malleus Maleficarum became the definitive text for witch hunters across Europe. It codified the accusations, laid out the interrogation techniques, and provided the legal and theological justifications for the systematic murder of thousands of people, mostly women. It was not a book of law, but a book of fear, and it gave men like the Inquisitor the intellectual armour they needed to justify their brutality. The interrogations of the suspected witches are different. They are more theatrical, more overtly religious. The Inquisitor, with his piercing eyes and his constant quoting from the Malleus, is the main actor. You and Klaus are his stagehands, his props. He begins not with questions of fact, but with questions of theology. Did you swear fealty to the black goat? Did you copulate with the devil in his form of an incubus? Did you use foul magic to curdle the milk of a neighbour's cow? The questions are strange, bizarre, and terrifying. The women, often simple, poor, and uneducated, have no defence against this onslaught. They are not just facing a charge of theft. They are facing an accusation that their very soul is damned. You watch as a woman, a midwife accused of using her magic to harm babies, is subjected to the water cure. But this time, it is not just water. It is holy water, a grotesque ritual where the Inquisitor sprinkles it over her face while you pour the rest into her lungs. The contradiction is so profound it is almost funny. A joke you heard from Thomas, the old-timer. The only thing a witch hunt ever truly purifies is the local magistrate's coffers. It's a bitter truth, and you find yourself seeing the grim, cynical reality behind the Inquisitor's righteous fervour. A quirky detail that the Inquisitor insists on is the search for the devil's mark. This is a small, painless spot on the body where the devil supposedly touched his devotee, and it is a central piece of evidence in his theological court. The search for this mark is often done with a long, thin needle, a pricker as the Inquisitor calls it. You're told to prick the woman's body, looking for a spot that does not bleed or cause pain. It is a humiliating, degrading search, a methodical prodding of a woman's body that feels more like an assault than an interrogation. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine belief or a perverted form of psychological torture designed to break a woman's spirit through shame and indignity. The confessions from these sessions are bizarre, fantastical things. The women, broken by the torture and the relentless theological pressure, confess to flying on broomsticks, to having sex with demons, to cursing crops and killing livestock. They confess to things that are impossible, and you, the man who has seen 1,000 confessions, know that these are not truths. They are stories, fantasies, a grim tapestry woven from fear, pain, and the Inquisitor's relentless suggestions. But the Inquisitor, his eyes alight with a fanatical glee, believes every word. He sees not a broken woman, but a true agent of evil, and each confession is a victory for God, and a step closer to a final judgment. The atmosphere in the dungeon is different. It is no longer just a place of pain, but a place of fevered religious zeal. The screams of the prisoners, once a sound of raw human agony, now feel like the cries of a soul in torment. The Inquisitor, in his black robes, is a constant, terrifying presence, his voice a low, constant drone of theological pronouncements and grim warnings. You find yourself feeling more and more like a tool, a simple piece of iron in a man's hand, a part of a machine you do not understand and a purpose you do not believe in. You remember the quiet dignity of Anselm the shoemaker, his simple belief a rock against your pain. These women, these accused witches, have no such dignity. They are broken, terrified things, and their confessions are a testament not to the truth, but to the power of suggestion and the relentless pressure of a theological zealot. The law you once served, the cold, hard logic of crime and punishment, has been replaced by a new, more terrifying law, a law of superstition and fear. Your role, as the assistant, is to hold the woman down, to assist in the pricking, to ensure the water flows correctly. You are the instrument of this new, terrible justice. And as you perform your duties, you feel a profound sense of emptiness, a cold void where your old, grudging sense of professionalism once was. You're not a truth seeker anymore. You're a participant in a lie, a collaborator in a murder. The hypocrisy of it all, the brutal cynicism of using the law to commit these acts, is a heavy weight on your soul. You remember that a long time ago, a travelling herbalist told you a story about a woman who was accused of witchcraft simply because her garden grew more beautiful flowers than her neighbours. He said she was a kind woman, a woman who loved the earth. Now, as you watch the Inquisitor pry another confession from a broken woman, you think of that story, and you feel a profound and bitter sadness. You are the one who is now making these stories real, and you are losing a piece of yourself with every passing day. The fever of the witch hunt has you in its grip, and there is no escape. You have become an expert. The realization hits you not with a sense of pride, but with a cold, hollow dread. You're no longer just an assistant, a pair of hands for a master. You're the man they turn to when a confession is particularly difficult, when a prisoner is especially stubborn, when the magistrate wants a confession without leaving too many visible marks. Your reputation precedes you now, a grim and shadowy thing that whispers through the back alleys and dusty courtrooms of the city. You are the ghost, they call you sometimes, because you can break a man's will without leaving a trace. This new reputation brings a strange kind of social standing. The common people who once averted their eyes now give you a wide berth, a mixture of fear and reverence in their gaze. You are a figure of power now, a man who holds the keys to life and death. The city guards who once treated you with contempt now nod in deference, their smiles a little too wide, their greetings a little too eager. The merchants who sell you your simple goods give you the best cuts of meat, the finest loaves of bread, their hands trembling slightly as they take your money. You're no longer an outcast. You're a force to be reckoned with, a necessary evil, a grim functionary of the city's grim justice. Your expertise is not just in the application of pain, but in the art of the psychological. You have learned to read a person's face like a book, to see the subtle shifts in their eyes that betray a lie, to hear the falter in their voice that signals a cracking resolve. You know when to be gentle, when to be brutal, and when to just be silent, letting the fear and the isolation of the dungeon do your work for you. You're a craftsman of a different kind, a sculptor of the human psyche, and your work is not to build, but to dismantle. A mainstream historical fact you now embody is the unique social position of the professional torturer. He was not a judge, but he held the power to sway a man's destiny with the turn of a screw. He was not a priest, but he could force a man to confess his deepest sins. He was not a nobleman, but he was feared and respected in a way that many noblemen were not. He was a paradox, a necessary part of the social order who was also ostracized from it. You live this paradox every day, a man of power who has no friends, a man of respect who is also reviled. A quirky detail you learn from one of the other older torturers is the use of music. He would sometimes have a small portable lute brought into the dungeon and he would play gentle, lilting tunes during a session. The contrast between the beautiful music and the brutal work was meant to disorient the prisoner, to break their focus, to make the suffering seem even more profound and terrible. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate, sophisticated psychological tactic, or just the personal eccentricity of a particularly creative sadist. For you, the idea is a horrifying one, a violation of the sanctity of music, a perversion of a beautiful art form. You remember the sound of your sister's singing, a clear, pure sound, and you feel a cold wave of revulsion at the thought of it being used for such a purpose. This new reputation also brings you a new kind of client, the Inquisition. The Inquisitors, unlike the nervous magistrates of the city court, are men of a different sort. They are cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy. They are not interested in justice. They are interested in heresy, in the purity of the soul. Their methods are more refined, their goals more absolute. When they ask for your services, it is not a request, it is a command. You are a tool in their hands, a new kind of weapon in a new kind of war. And you, the man they call the Ghost, are their most effective weapon. You remember your first session with an Inquisitor. The prisoner was a man, a scholar accused of reading forbidden texts. He was a learned man, a man of books and philosophy, not of physical endurance. The Inquisitor did not use physical torture. He used you. He used your mind. He made you talk to the man, to ask him about his family, about his life, about his love of books. He made you connect with him, to see him as a human being. And then he made you break him, not with a thumbscrew, but with a simple, quiet statement. If you do not confess, We will find your family, and we will find out how much they know of your heresy." The man who had endured days of starvation and cold broke in an instant. He confessed to everything, his body shaking with a terror that was not for himself but for his wife and children. This is the new kind of torture you are mastering. Not the torture of the body, but the torture of the mind. The most effective confessions you learn are not those that are screamed in agony, but those that are whispered in despair. You're not just a torturer, you are an inquisitor yourself, a master of a cruel and terrible form of psychological warfare. You are a manipulator, a puppeteer, and your puppets are the condemned. The price of your expertise is a deep, profound isolation. The other assistants, who once were your peers, now look at you with a mixture of respect and fear. Klaus, your old master, looks at you with a kind of grim, quiet pride, as if you are a Frankenstein's monster he has created. You are alone, a solitary figure in a world of shadows, a man who has mastered his craft but has lost his soul in the process. You remember a time when you were just a boy who was scared of the dark. Now, you are the thing that lives in the dark. You are the ghost, the expert, the man they call when they need a confession, no matter the cost. You are a professional, and your grim work has made you into a monster. And the scariest part of all is that you no longer care. The line between right and wrong has not just blurred, it has been erased. In its place is a cold, professional indifference, a blankness of the soul that is more terrifying than any scream, any brand, any broken bone. You are a master of a grim and terrible art, and your masterpiece is yourself, a living testament to the human capacity for cruelty. The economics of pain are a strange and often contradictory reality you are now living. While you are a reviled outcast, your grim work makes you a man of means, a part of a grim and intricate financial web. The city, which shuns you, also pays you, and the money, a heavy, tangible thing, is a constant, unsettling reminder of the price of suffering. You learn, not from a ledger, but from experience, that every scream has a price, and every confession a value. Your income is not a simple wage. It is a complex system of fees and payments. You're paid for each interrogation session, a set fee for your time and expertise. You're paid a larger sum for a confession, a bonus for a job well done. You're paid for a public execution, a grand payment for a grand spectacle. You're also paid for more mundane tasks, such as the public branding of a thief or the cutting off of an ear. The money is paid in coin, heavy sacks of copper and silver, sometimes even gold, delivered by a nervous city clerk who avoids your gaze. A mainstream historical fact you now understand intimately is that the role of the torturer and executioner was a professional one, often paid for by the municipality or the local lord. The position was a lucrative one, as it required a specific brutal skill set that few others possessed. Your profession is not one of passion but of profit, a grim business where the product is a confession and the raw material is a human being. The money, you realize with a cold kind of horror, is what makes this all possible. It is the grease in the gears of the machine, the cold, hard logic that allows for the continued existence of this brutal system. A quirky detail that you learn from one of the other torturers is the existence of bribes. A family with a loved one in the dungeon, a wealthy merchant with a son accused of a minor crime, a nobleman who wants to avoid a scandal. They will all pay. They will pay for a gentler session, a thumbscrew turned a little less tightly, a rack stretched a little less far. They will pay to keep the confession brief, to keep the names of their friends and associates out of the magistrate's parchment. These bribes, often slipped to you in a heavy sack of coin by a nervous intermediary, are a new and unsettling source of income. You learn to take them without a word, to simply nod, and to know that a coin given is a promise made. It is a silent, corrupting contract that you are now a part of. Historians still argue whether these bribes were a common practice or a secret sin of a few corrupt torturers, but for you, they are a grim reality, a new layer of moral ambiguity in a world already saturated with it. You also learn that the local lord or king is not just a source of payment, but also a source of debt. A particularly difficult confession, a particularly stubborn prisoner, can lead to a promise of a future payment, a debt of gratitude from the powerful. These debts are often more valuable than coin, as they can be used to secure your position, to gain a favour, or to protect you from the ire of the public. You are a man who is both paid and indebted, a pawn in a larger game of power and politics. The money you earn, you realize, is not just a payment for a service rendered. It is a price for your soul, a slow, steady erosion of your humanity. The money, the heavy, tangible coin, is also a source of profound, isolating guilt. You walk through the market, the money heavy in your purse, and you see the faces of the people, their tired, worried expressions. You know that you have earned this money by causing a pain that they cannot even imagine. You see a baker selling a loaf of bread, and you know that you have earned the coin to buy it by breaking a man's spirit. You see a child playing in the street, and you know that your money, the money you will use to buy a toy for your hypothetical children, is stained with the suffering of others. The money is a constant physical reminder of the cost of your work. Your relationship with money changes. It is no longer a simple tool for survival, but a symbol of your corruption. You find yourself spending it quickly, trying to get rid of it, to wash your hands of its grim origin. You buy things you don't need, clothes you won't wear, food you won't eat. It is a desperate, futile attempt to cleanse yourself, to spend away your guilt. But the guilt, like the smell of the dungeon, clings to you, a constant, unwanted companion. This financial reality of your profession is a grim paradox. You are a man of means, but you are also a prisoner of your own wealth. The money you earn buys you a life of security, a life free from the grinding poverty that once haunted your youth. But it also buys you a life of isolation, a life where you are forever branded by your work. The cost of your survival, you realize with a cold kind of clarity, is your soul. You're a man who has traded his humanity for a sack of coin, and the price you're starting to see is far higher than you could have ever imagined. You think back to your old life, to the simple joy of a day's work, a day's pay. The money was a clean thing then, a tangible reward for an honest effort. Now, the money you earn is a dirty, corrupting thing, a constant reminder of the darkness you have embraced. You are a rich man, a man of wealth and power, but you're also the poorest man in the city, a man who has lost everything that truly matters. The economics of pain, you have learned, is a rigged game, and you, the man with the heavy purse, are the one who has lost the most. You have evolved past the simple application of pain. You're no longer just a brute with a set of tools. You're a psychologist, a master manipulator of the human mind. The most effective confessions you've learned are not those that are screamed in agony, but those that are whispered in a moment of profound, soul-crushing despair. This is the new frontier of your grim craft, a subtle and terrifying art form that you are becoming a master of. The body, you now know, is just the first step. The real work is in breaking the mind. Your education in this dark art begins with Klaus, who, in a rare moment of philosophical rumination, explains his method. He doesn't see the mind and body as separate entities, but as two sides of the same coin. The pain of the thumbscrews or the rack is not just a physical sensation. It is an assault on the will, a constant, unrelenting pressure that erodes the spirit. The body breaks first, but the mind is what truly surrenders. You learn to listen for the subtle shifts, the moment when the defiance in a prisoner's eyes gives way to a terrified emptiness. This, you learn, is the moment of truth. A mainstream historical fact you're now a part of is the use of sensory deprivation and psychological torture as a means of extracting a confession. While the physical torture was a more visible and more dramatic part of the process, the isolation, the cold, the constant drip of water, the fear of the unknown, these were often more effective tools. The dungeon itself was a weapon, and the long solitary confinement was a form of torture all its own. You're now a part of a grim tradition that has long understood that the mind, left to its own devices in a place of profound dread, will often turn on itself, manufacturing a confession out of a desperate need for the suffering to end. You learn to use the prisoner's own mind against them. You will sit in the antechamber for hours, a silent, grim presence, doing nothing. The prisoner in their cell can hear you. They can hear the sound of the tools being cleaned, the rhythmic scrape of metal on stone. They can hear the occasional low grunt from Klaus, the sound of a door opening and closing. The silence is punctuated by the promise of pain, a psychological drumbeat that slowly, surely erodes their sanity. This is the interrogation of silence, a tactic you learn to master. The longer the silence, the more terrifying the anticipation, and the more likely the mind is to break before the body. A quirky tidbit you learn from an inquisitor is the use of the good cop, bad cop routine, a method that is both ancient and surprisingly effective. One inquisitor, a man with a booming voice and a theatrical flair, would be the brutal, relentless interrogator full of fire and fury. He would threaten the prisoner with the most gruesome tortures, his face a mask of righteous rage. Then he would leave, and you would enter, a silent, impassive figure. You would offer the prisoner a drink of water, a piece of bread, a moment of respite. You would speak to them in a low, gentle voice, offering them a chance to confess, to save themselves from the Inquisitor's wrath. The contrast, this sudden shift from brutality to kindness, was a psychological weapon all its own, a tool that often produced a confession far faster than any thumbscrew ever could. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate, sophisticated tactic or just a byproduct of the different personalities of the torturers and inquisitors. You also learn to use the prisoner's family against them. A particularly effective tool is the simple, quiet threat. You don't have to do anything to them. You just have to mention their name to let the prisoner know that you know who they are, where they live, who they love. The fear in a person's eyes when they realise that their actions could have consequences for their family is a confession in and of itself. It is a form of emotional torture that is far more potent than any physical pain, a silent, terrible pressure that forces a person to choose between their own soul and the safety of those they love. This is the new, more brutal you, the man who breaks not bones but hearts. You remember a session with a man accused of heresy, a father of 3. He was a stubborn man, a man of profound faith, who had endured days of cold, hunger and physical torture without breaking. He would not recant his beliefs, his face a mask of defiance and spiritual fervour. Klaus, in a rare moment of frustration, was at a loss. But the Inquisitor, a cold, calculating man, simply said, "Tell him about his children." You did. You sat with the man in his cell and you told him, in a low, quiet voice, about his children, about their ages, about their bright, innocent faces. You told him that their fate was in his hands, that a confession would mean their safety, and a refusal, their possible damnation. The man who had survived the most brutal tortures broke down and confessed. He confessed not out of fear for himself, but out of a desperate, primal love for his family. He confessed not to a crime, but to a desperate plea for mercy. This is the grim reality of your new expertise. You're no longer just a professional. You are a manipulator of the most profound and terrifying kind. You can read a man's mind, you can find the crack in his armour, and you can exploit it with a chilling, surgical precision. The physical torture you now know is just a distraction, a sideshow for the magistrate and the public. The real work, the true art of your profession, is in the silent, invisible breaking of the human spirit. You are a master of this art now. You can sit with a man for hours, saying nothing, and watch as his mind unravels, as he begins to see his own demons in the shadows on the wall. You can listen to the sound of his breathing, the frantic beat of his heart, and you know, with a cold, terrifying certainty, when he is about to break. This is the new you, the final and most terrible stage of your transformation. You're no longer a boy, no longer a simple torturer. You're a ghost, a presence that can break a man's soul without ever touching his body. And the loneliness of this knowledge, this terrible, isolating power, is a new kind of torture all its own. The man you once were, the boy who cried when his dog was hit by a cart, is a distant, fading memory. In his place is a blank, emotionless void, a perfect machine for the extraction of confessions. The whispers and rumours of the Inquisition's arrival have been a low hum in the dungeon for months, a growing dread that settled in your bones. They are a different breed of justice, a new and terrifying wave. When they finally arrive, it is not with a great fanfare, but with a quiet, unsettling efficiency. The Inquisitor, a man named Father Alaric, is a gaunt, severe-looking man with eyes that seem to peer not into your face, but into your very soul. He is accompanied by a silent entourage of clerks and armed guards, all of them dressed in sombre black. They move through the dungeon with a chilling purpose, a quiet procession of doom. Your old world of pragmatic, if brutal justice is now eclipsed by this new, zealous order. The magistrates, with their nervous scribbling and legalistic procedures, are gone. In their place is Father Alaric, and he is not interested in legal precedent, but in the purity of faith. He does not ask for evidence. He asks for repentance. He does not care about crime, he cares about heresy. You're no longer just a professional, you're a tool in a holy war, a new and terrifying chapter in your grim life. The sessions with the Inquisitor are different. They are more ritualistic, more theatrical. The prisoner, a suspected heretic, is brought in and strapped to a chair. Father Alaric does not begin with threats or questions about the crime. He begins with a long, drawn-out theological lecture, a sermon on the dangers of heresy and the damnation of the soul. He quotes from Scripture, from the writings of the great theologians, his voice a low, relentless drone. This, you learn, is the first step of their method, to disarm the prisoner not with pain but with the overwhelming weight of their own spiritual inadequacy. A mainstream historical fact you're now a part of is the chilling effectiveness of the Inquisition. It was a terrifyingly efficient machine, a legal and theological body with a singular purpose. Its methods were not just physical torture, but a sophisticated system of psychological manipulation, social pressure, and spiritual intimidation. The Inquisition's power came not just from the fear of physical pain, but from the terror of eternal damnation. It was a total system of control, and you, the master of physical pain, are now just a small part of a much larger, more terrifying machine. You watch as Father Alaric uses your old tools, but for a new purpose. The water cure, once a way to get a confession of a crime, is now a baptismal rite, a perverse ritual of cleansing the soul. He uses the thumbscrews, but not for a confession of a crime, but for a confession of heresy. He's not interested in the details of the prisoner's life, but in the state of their soul. He is a shepherd, you realise with a cold kind of irony, but a shepherd who uses a club and a brand, not a staff. A quirky detail that you observe is how the Inquisitor's clerks, the men who document the sessions, have a separate set of ledgers. They don't just record the confessions, they also record the signs of the devil. A sudden twitch of a muscle, a change in the colour of the skin, a low groan. All of it is meticulously documented as a sign of demonic possession. The entire process, from the questions to the torture, is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The torture is not just for a confession. It is for confirmation of their pre-existing belief. Historians still argue whether these inquisitors were true believers or simply men of profound ambition, using the fear of heresy as a way to consolidate their power. For you, the difference is academic. The outcome is the same. Your role in this new system is that of an instrument. You are not a partner, a collaborator, or a peer. You are a tool, a simple piece of iron in Father Alaric's hand. He does not speak to you about method or psychology. He simply gives you a command, a low, quiet word that means you are to begin the work. You are to apply the pain, not for a confession, but for a theological purpose. You are to break the body, not to get a confession, but to force the demon to speak. The prisoners, under the Inquisition's methods, are a new kind of broken. They are not just physically and psychologically shattered, they are spiritually damned. The fear in their eyes is not just of you, but of God. Their pleas are not for mercy from you, but for mercy from a power far greater than you. Their confessions are not of a crime, but of a sin, a deep, profound corruption of the soul. You watch as a woman, a seamstress accused of praying to a pagan god, confesses to having sex with a goat, to drinking the blood of infants, to a litany of bizarre and impossible crimes. She's not confessing to the truth. She's confessing to the fear of a fire that burns not in this world but in the next. This is the most unsettling part of the Inquisition's arrival. They do not just break the body, they poison the soul. They do not just take a confession, they take a person's faith. They are not just men of justice, they are men of profound, terrifying spiritual warfare. And you, the man who has spent his life in the shadows, are now a part of this war, an unwitting soldier in a crusade of terror and superstition. You feel a profound sense of emptiness, a cold void where your old grudging sense of professionalism once was. You're not a truth seeker anymore. You're a participant in a lie, a collaborator in a murder. The hypocrisy of it all, the brutal cynicism of using the law to commit these acts, is a heavy weight on your soul. You're no longer just a professional. You're a tool in a new kind of terror. And as you watch Father Alaric and his entourage leave, their quiet footsteps echoing in the empty dungeon, you know, with a chilling certainty that this is the final, most terrifying chapter of your grim life. The man you once were, the man who was just a professional, is gone. In his place is a blank, empty void, a soul that has been broken not by pain, but by a profound and terrible spiritual corruption. The years have passed, not in a linear stream, but in a series of dark, disconnected moments. The screams, once a terrifying symphony, have faded into a low hum, a background noise that you no longer consciously hear. The blood, once a shocking, visceral sight, has become just another stain to be scrubbed from the stone. The faces of the prisoners, once a source of nightmares, have become a blurred, indistinct mass. You're an old man now, your hands gnarled and stiff with a lifetime of brutal work, your body racked with a permanent ache from the cold and damp of the dungeon. Your time as a torturer is winding down, but the ghosts of your past are only just beginning to stir. Your new life, a life of semi-retirement, is an unsettling paradox. You're a man of means, a man with a heavy purse, but you have no family, no friends, no one to share your wealth with. You have a small house on the outskirts of the city, a place where the air is clean and the sun is warm, but you find yourself drawn back to the shadows, to the cold, damp silence of the dungeon. It is a home you have built with your own hands, a life you have carved out with your own cruelty, and it is the only place you truly feel you belong. The younger torturers, the new apprentices and assistants, look at you with a mixture of reverence and fear. They call you the Old Hand, a title that is both a sign of respect and a grim reminder of your age and your past. They ask for your advice, for your expertise, for your stories. You tell them, your voice a low, gravelly rasp, not with pride, but with a weary, detached indifference. You teach them not with enthusiasm, but with a cold, professional remove, as if you are teaching a particularly difficult knot. You are a living legend, a relic of a darker age, a testament to the brutal, unforgiving nature of your trade. A mainstream historical fact you now live with is that the torturer, like any other craftsman, would eventually retire. He would live out his days on a pension from the city, or on the wealth he had accumulated. But unlike a baker or a blacksmith, he could never truly escape his past. The memories, the sounds, the smells, they would follow him, a constant unwanted companion. The retirement was not a release, but a new kind of prison, a solitary confinement of the soul. You're a free man, but you're not free. Your days are filled with the slow, methodical rituals of old age. You tend a small garden, a pathetic weed-choked patch of dirt that is a sad imitation of Ulrich's. You sit by the fire, a cup of warm ale in your hand, and you watch the flames dance, and in their flicker you see the faces of the condemned. You see the fear in their eyes, the terror in their pleas, the final empty resignation in their souls. The ghosts of your past, once a distant, muffled sound, are now a clear, constant presence, a conversation you can no longer turn off. A quirky detail that you find yourself doing is collecting small, insignificant objects from the dungeon. A broken thumbscrew, a frayed piece of rope from the strappado, a rusty old brand. You keep them in a small wooden box, a grim collection of mementos, a physical testament to your life's work. You will take them out sometimes, and hold them in your gnarled, scarred hands, and you will remember. You will remember the feeling of the screw turning, the give of the rope, the searing heat of the iron. Historians still argue whether this was a form of professional pride, a desperate attempt to hold on to a sense of purpose, or a grim form of self-inflicted torture, a constant physical reminder of the sins of your past. The dreams are the worst. They're not nightmares of screaming prisoners and blood-soaked floors, but quiet, unsettling things. You dream of your father's hand on your shoulder, of your sister's singing voice, of the smell of fresh-baked bread. You dream of the life you could have had, the life you traded for security for a full stomach, and you wake up with a cold sweat on your brow, a profound and terrible sadness in your heart, a loneliness that is more painful than any torture you have ever inflicted. The man you once were, the boy who cried when his dog was hit by a cart, is a ghost that haunts your sleep, a constant, unwanted reminder of your lost innocence. You find yourself, in a moment of profound introspection, trying to justify your life. You tell yourself that you are a professional, a necessary part of the legal system. You tell yourself that you did what you had to do to survive, to escape the grinding poverty of your youth. You tell yourself that you are a truth seeker, a man who served a higher purpose. But the words are hollow, a thin, transparent lie that you can no longer believe. You're a man who has broken other men, a man who has taken their humanity, and in the process has lost his own. The physical toll of your work is also a constant presence. Your hands, once so strong, are now weak and gnarled. Your back, once so straight, is now a permanent slump. The damp and cold of the dungeon have left you with a persistent nagging pain in your joints. Your body, like your soul, is a testament to the brutal, unforgiving nature of your trade. You are a living museum of suffering, a walking, breathing monument to the cruelty of man. You are at the end of your life now, a silent, solitary figure in a small house, with a small garden and a heavy wooden box of ghosts. The world has moved on, and the younger generation of torturers, with their newfangled tools and their new, more sophisticated methods, has replaced you. But you are not gone. You are a part of the city, a part of its history, a part of its collective memory. You're the ghost, the old hand, the man who lives in the shadows. And you are, for all your wealth and all your power, the loneliest man in the world, a man who has outlived his purpose, and a man who has outlived his own soul. The wind whispers through the cracks in your walls, and it sounds like the cries of the condemned. You sit alone in your small house, the fire casting long dancing shadows on the walls, and you find yourself in the grim solitude of a life's end. Your body is a map of age and decay, your hands twisted and gnarled, your back a permanent slump. The sounds of the city, once so distant, are now a constant muffled presence. A world that exists without you. Your world, the world you built, is a world of ghosts and shadows, a tapestry of 1,000 screams and 1,000 broken souls. Your legacy, you realise with a cold, hollow dread, is not in the money you've accumulated or the house you live in. Your legacy is in the pain you have caused, in the lives you have destroyed, in the grim, indelible mark you have left on the world. You think back to your first day, to your father's final, decisive hand on your shoulder, to the promise of a life free from poverty. That promise, you realise, was a devil's bargain. You have escaped the cold of hunger, but you're now a prisoner of a different, more profound coldness. You have a full belly, but your soul is an empty, hollow vessel. The cost of your survival, you are now learning, was far greater than you ever imagined. You find yourself in the quiet solitude of your old age reflecting on the lives you've ruined. The shoemaker, Anselm, his quiet defiance, his simple faith. The woman on the wheel, her broken pleas, her final silent terror. The apprentices and assistants you have taught. The young boys you have moulded into monsters. Their faces, once a blur of fear and pain, are now a vivid, terrifying presence in your mind. They are your legacy, a collection of broken souls and shattered lives, a grim monument to your life's work. A mainstream historical fact you're now a part of is the profound social and psychological impact of torture, not just on the victim, but on the perpetrator. The men who did this work were not just professionals, they were human beings, and the brutality of their work left a permanent, indelible mark on their own souls. The solitude, the drinking, the strange rituals, these were not just personal quirks, they were coping mechanisms, a desperate attempt to reconcile their two lives, the man who breaks bones and the man who lives in the world. You are a living testament to this truth, a man who has paid a terrible price for his grim profession. Your mind, once so sharp and focused, is now a labyrinth of fractured memories. You remember a joke you once heard in the tavern, a grim little ditty about a man so stubborn he'd argue with a brick wall. But now you realise the wall is not an external thing. The wall is in your own mind, a grim barrier that separates you from your past, from your humanity. And you, the man who once broke others, are now a prisoner of your own mind, a solitary figure in a dungeon of memory. A quirky detail you find yourself doing is talking to your collection of grim mementos, your box of ghosts. You will take out a broken thumbscrew, a frayed piece of rope, and you will talk to them, your voice a low, gravelly rasp. You will ask them about the people they broke, about the confessions they coerced. You are talking not to the objects, but to the ghosts that haunt them, the memories that cling to them. Historians still argue whether this was a form of madness, a last-ditch effort to hold on to a sense of professional pride, or a profound and terrible form of penance, a final, futile attempt to atone for the sins of your past. For you, the difference is academic. It is the only way you know how to talk to your ghosts. The loneliness is a profound physical presence. You are a man who has spent his life surrounded by people, but you have never truly been with anyone. The other torturers were colleagues, not friends. The magistrates were employers, not peers. The prisoners were objects, not people. Your life has been one of profound, terrible isolation, and now, in your old age, that isolation has become your world. You're a solitary figure in a small house, a man who has outlived his purpose and his humanity. The silence of your house is a terrifying, living thing. It is not an empty silence, but a silence that is filled with the echoes of your past. The low hum of the rack, the squeal of the thumbscrews, the soft, terrible pleas of the condemned. They are all here, in the quiet of your home, a constant, unwanted companion. You have created a life of silence and solitude, but that silence is now filled with the very things you tried to escape. You think about your life as a story, a grim, dark tale of a boy who traded his soul for a full belly. And you wonder, in the long dark hours of the night, if it was worth it, if the price of survival was too high, if the life you saved, the life of a boy who would have starved in the streets, was worth the price of 1,000 lost souls. You don't have an answer. There is no moral lesson in this story, no grand final truth. There is only a grim, empty reality, a life lived in the shadows, a life of pain, loneliness, and regret. Your legacy, you now know, is not in the history books or the city ledgers. It is in the haunted memories of the old men you taught, in the nightmares of the children who saw your work, in the quiet, empty despair of the families you destroyed. It is a legacy of darkness, a grim, indelible mark on the world. You're not a hero, not a villain. You are a ghost, a relic, a man who once was and is now a memory. And the final terrible chapter of your life, you realize, is not in your death, but in the slow, agonizing recognition of your own profound and terrible failure. The wind howls outside your window, and it sounds like the final desperate cry of a condemned man. You're at the end now, not just of your life, but of the story you have lived. The cold, damp silence of the dungeon, the smell of iron and decay, the taste of fear, all of it is a part of you, a part of the man you became. Your body is a prison, your mind a labyrinth of shadows, and your final moments are a grim reckoning, a final, inescapable confrontation with your own soul. The world, which you once held in a vice-like grip, is now a distant, blurred memory, and the only reality that remains is the one you have built with your own hands, the one you have filled with the ghosts of your past. Your death, you realize, will not be a grand theatrical affair. There will be no public execution, no final defiant speech. It will be a quiet, solitary affair, a final, unceremonious passing in your small, cold house. You are a man who lived in the shadows, and you will die in them. The world, which you once served with such brutal efficiency, will not even notice your passing. You will be a small, insignificant footnote in the grim history of the city, a name on a ledger, a ghost in a place of ghosts. Your final moments are not a time of peace, but of profound, unsettling clarity. The fog of memory, which had once protected you from the full horror of your life, is now gone. You see the faces of the condemned with a terrifying vividness. You hear their screams with a crystalline clarity. You feel their terror with a raw, visceral immediacy. The memories are not a story you can tell yourself anymore. They are a living, breathing part of your reality, a final, inescapable judgment. You are a man who has spent his life in the business of confessions, and now, in your final moments, you are the one who is being judged, and the judge is yourself. A mainstream historical fact that you're now a part of is the chilling concept of a final, solitary reckoning. The torturer, a man who dealt in the most profound kind of human suffering, often died alone, a figure of fear and pity, a man haunted by the ghosts of his own making. The retirement, the solitude, the final unceremonious death, it was a form of cosmic justice, a final, inevitable payment for a life of sanctioned cruelty. You are a man who has outlived his purpose and his humanity, and the only legacy you have is the one you have built in your own mind, a grim and terrible museum of suffering. Your life, you realize, was not a story of survival. It was a story of a boy who traded his soul for a full belly, a boy who chose a life of comfort over a life of innocence. You think back to your father, to his final decisive hand on your shoulder, and you no longer see a man who was saving you from poverty. You see a man who was condemning you to a life of profound and terrible darkness. The choice, you now know, was not between a full belly and an empty one. The choice was between a life of hardship and a life of horror. You chose horror. A quirky detail that you find yourself remembering is the sound of the wind. Not the wind that howls outside your window, but the wind that would whistle through the cracks in the dungeon walls, a low, mournful sound that was a constant, unwanted companion. You remember thinking, as a boy, that it was the sound of the damned, and now, in your final moments, you realise that it was not the sound of the damned. It was the sound of your own soul, a low, mournful wail of protest, a constant, unwanted companion that you tried to silence, but could not. Historians still argue whether the sounds of the dungeon were a source of professional pride or a profound and terrible source of mental anguish. For you, the answer is a grim and terrible truth. The final confession, the one you have spent your entire life avoiding, is a simple one. I am sorry. But the words, you realise with a final, desperate gasp, are for no one. The men and women you have broken are long gone. The families you have destroyed are scattered to the winds. The only person who is left to hear your confession is yourself, and your own judgment is far more severe than any magistrate's, any inquisitor's. You're a man who has spent his life forcing confessions from others, and now your final confession is a silent, terrible whisper, a final, futile attempt to find peace in a life of profound and terrible violence. The dreams are gone now. The ghosts have become a part of your reality. You're a man who has lived a life of violence, and your final moments are filled with the terror of your own creation. The cold, the damp, the smell of iron and decay. It is all here in your small, warm house. A final, terrible testament to the life you have lived. You're a man who has lost his soul, and in your final moments you are a man who has found it. A grim and terrible thing. A mirror that reflects the darkness of your own heart. The wind down begins now. The fire, which had been so bright, is now a low, dying ember. The shadows on the walls, which had been so long and dancing, are now a quiet, settling darkness. The air, which had been so filled with the ghosts of your past, is now a still and silent place. The memories, which had been so vivid and terrifying, are now a soft, fading whisper, a final, gentle farewell. Your body, which had been a prison of pain, is now a quiet, sleeping thing. Your mind, which had been a labyrinth of shadows, is now a calm and peaceful place. The long dark journey is over. The final confession has been made. And the only sound that remains is the slow, gentle beat of your own heart. A final, quiet drum beat in the long, dark silence. The fire is now a low hum, its last heat a gentle caress on your face. The scent of smoke, so clean and sharp, slowly replaces the lingering miasma of memory. The darkness in the corners of the room isn't menacing anymore. It's a soft velvet curtain, pulling close around you. The ghosts, once so loud, have finally gone to sleep, their stories finished. The memories are not a burden, but a river, flowing peacefully into a silent sea. Your breathing slows, your thoughts soften, and the world outside, with its clamour and cruelty, fades into a distant, beautiful dream. The weight is gone now, the journey over. You're just a flicker of light, a whisper of a breath, fading into the long, dark and final quiet.